I'm Diane Rahm, and I will be serving as your Zoom host today. We are a welcoming congregation. All are welcome. Come as you are and know you are welcomed here. We are a shared ministry. The first Sunday of the month, our minister, Reverend Ade Krabah, is in the pulpit. Other Sundays, we draw on inspiration from members of this congregation, members of the community, or visiting ministers. Today, we are honored to hear from Reverend Susan Yarbrough. Susan is a Unitarian Universalist minister who first interned at First UU in Austin and now lives in Denver with her spouse. Susan loved UUNB since she first preached at our now shuttered building in 2015, and she is thankful for the warmth and hospitality of this welcoming congregation. If you wish to receive a copy of our newsletter or want more information, please email us at uunb135@gmail.com. And please stay after the service for our virtual coffee and conversation so we might get to know you better. Our opening words for today's service: mindful of truth ever exceeding our knowledge and community ever exceeding our practice, reverently we covenant together, beginning with ourselves as we are, to share the strength of integrity and the heritage of the Spirit in the unending quest for wisdom and love. And now Susan will light the chalice.
We kindle this light in celebration of the life and love and learning and laughter and even the lamentations that we share. Our reading today is a poem by Stephen King. Yes, that's Stephen King, the one who writes horror novels, but who in 2012 published a time travel novel entitled 11/22/63 about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The novel was eventually adapted for a television miniseries, and Stephen King wrote this poem for the last episode. We did not ask for this room or this music. We were invited in. Therefore, because the dark surrounds us, let us turn our faces toward the light. Let us endure hardship to be grateful for plenty. We have been given pain to be astounded by joy. We have been given life to deny death. We did not ask for this room or this music, but because we are here, let us dance. Let's be together for a moment in prayer and meditation. God of many names, whose highest name and form is human love, thank you for all the people gathered here today and for how they continue to bless my life. We give thanks for the grandeur of creation that fills us with awe and imagination, for the wonders and surprises of human life, for our communities and the sacred ties that keep us together, for courageous people who work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression, for those who have died so that others might live in dignity and freedom, for opportunities to change and grow, and for your holy presence among us. Strengthen us to shoulder the responsibility that gratitude gives us, and open the eyes of our hearts so that we may see what is ours to do. Amen.
And now we will hear the message, Gratitude in Difficult Times.
First, let me thank you all for being here and for inviting me here. I'm so glad to be with this congregation again today, and equally glad and grateful that cherished friends from Houston and Austin and Colorado and New York and South Carolina and Michigan have joined us. And a special thank you to Diane Rahm and Meredith Patterson for shepherding the technology and the music that have already enhanced our time together. I don't know what your Thanksgiving Day and weekend have been like, but mine have been joyous and soulful as they have been all my life. I was born right around Thanksgiving, I think maybe a couple of minutes after Thanksgiving Day itself. So this is usually a birthday weekend for me. And I'm one of those lucky people who really likes getting older. And even though I can't or do many of the things I used to do, I do find fresh pleasure every year in who I've met, what I've learned, and how good my heart and soul feel most of the time. But even if it weren't the occasion for celebrating the start of another trip around the sun, or another trip back to the living room after I forgot why I'd gone in there in the first place, I would still love this holiday above all others because it seems to me what life and spirituality have become centered on for me. Thanksgiving, gratitude, and a daily sense of astonishment that I'm alive and on this earth with all of you. This year, however, has been so different for all of us, not only in how we've spent the holidays since March, but also in how we've spent all the days since then. For the past 20 years, when I first wake up every morning, I say a quick prayer thanking God for letting me see this day. But my previous feelings of eager expectations and a fresh start are now darkened by fear. Is this the day I'll find out that I have the virus? The day when a friend gets sick? The day when someone I love dies? My wife Sylvia and I moved to Denver, Colorado on February 1st of this year, so she could begin work as director of spiritual care at a large children's hospital. I had planned to look for the kind of work I did in Houston last year and loved so much: chaplaincy to residents of a retirement community, plus occasional guest preaching and facilitation of grief support groups. But just as we had gotten settled in our new apartment, churches and retirement centers locked down and still remain that way. And the two old friends I know in the Denver area wisely decided to mostly stay home because the three of us are all in our mid 70s and would like to live at least a few more years. Added to that was the fact that in an effort to have a smaller carbon footprint, Sylvia and I decided to have only one car, which she usually takes to work because the pandemic has made public transportation unreliable. So for the past 8 months, I've been unemployed, isolated, and a bit lonely, sitting at home feeling useless and somewhat disoriented, but with plenty of time to think. When I finally came to somewhat peaceful terms with the fact that it would probably be many months before I could work again as a minister, my frustration and gloom began to lift, and I decided to remind myself every day of the things for which I'm grateful. Friends like you, excellent health and health insurance, a comfortable apartment in a walkable neighborhood, an adequate retirement income, books to read, warm clothing to wear, a solid marriage to a wonderful woman, a funny and companionable dog, a faith community, a daily view of the mountains, the visible change of seasons, and even the snow. But as I took comfort in this gratitude list, something began to bother me. And it took me about a month to understand that most of the things and people for which I'm grateful have come into my life because I'm white. My good education in grades 1 through 12 was within a lily white school system in Dallas. The two undergraduate schools I attended, as well as my two graduate schools, my law school and my seminary, were 99% white. In every law office that employed me and every courtroom where I later sat as a judge, and in the 2 years I spent as a university professor, 99% of all my peers and colleagues were white. All of these places of education and work were marked by a white dominance and white privilege that I failed to notice, even as I profited from them socially, economically, and professionally. And now here I was in Denver, seeing with a new sadness and clearness of vision that Black and Latinx people are disproportionately dying of COVID-19, that racism is just as deadly and destructive in a progressive blue city as it was in Dallas, that the hospitable employees of the supermarket and small restaurants I had begun to patronize were being laid off and were now looking down the very short barrel of poverty and eviction and homelessness, and that families were becoming unraveled because of the enormous new stresses on them and the lack of infrastructure and resources and safety nets to help them manage. Like you, I am unsettled and angry about the losses and pain that this year has brought to everyone on the earth. And I'm deeply disappointed with myself that for so long I have expressed my gratitude as a list of things that have come into my privileged life on the backs of others. It took me a while, but I realized around mid-September that what I need to do spiritually is to reframe my gratitude so that I can practice it differently in these difficult times and can let it teach me what I need to learn. For the past 10 years, my primary daily spiritual practice has been Examen, that's spelled E-X-A-M-E-N, where at the end of the day, I write down the three things I've been most grateful for, the three things I've been least grateful for, and then ask, where is God in all of this mess? Although this has been a useful practice for me, it had become somewhat rote and easy, which is a clear sign that a spiritual practice is no longer working. Mine obviously needed some major tweaking, so I began doing it this way. At the end of the day, I write down the three most important interactions I've had with other people, the three most disturbing things I've learned about myself, and then ask, where am I and where is hope in all of this mess? The results of reframing this evening practice have turned me inside out and have led me to a deeper and more soulful gratitude, even in these difficult times. For example, last night I listed the three most important interactions I had with other people yesterday as a short conversation with a Kroger cashier about how beautiful he thinks falling snow is, a longer conversation with an elderly neighbor in which she shed tears of joy over the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and a brief interaction with a homeless man about how glad he is that he hasn't gotten sick. The three most disturbing things I noticed about myself were, first, my lingering impatience and restlessness at not being employed. Second, my abiding distrust of those who voted for Trump, my continued unwillingness to listen to them, and how my attitudes contribute to polarization and a lack of national healing. And third, the occasional resurfacing of my childish belief that the vast harm caused by COVID and the past 4 years of white nationalism are punishments from on high, as if God has the time or the desire to sit around plotting revenge against us for the unwise and destructive choices we've made. For almost 9 months, all of us have been living in a liminal space, an in-between time that continues to be disconcerting, of indeterminate length, lacking in the warmth and comfort of physical contact, and just plain frightening. As humans, we have a strong preference for stories and narratives that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the narrative in which we are now living has only a beginning so far. And it's easy to lose perspective if we become focused on wondering when the pandemic will end or when an effective vaccine will become available, or how we'll pick up the pieces of our individual and cultural brokenness. In my own experience, waiting for the end of anything has never been refreshing or creative. But what I'm learning from my own reframe practice of gratitude during this emotional pandemic of uncertainty and anxiety and waiting is to look for the intangible spiritual gifts and lessons in what is. As for the gifts, 3 have been especially important to me. The first is the gift of seeing that we are all doing things we could not have imagined a year ago. And that this very exercise of our individual and collective imagination is allowing us to create and participate in a dream bigger than ourselves. The second gift is our collective engagement in a much needed re-examination of what is required of us to protect fragile democratic norms. And the third gift is that of learning what we must do to become allies and advocates for those who suffer because we have pursued individualism and have accepted racial privilege over the common good. As for the lessons of this time, they already number in the dozens, but the 3 that are most significant to me so far are these. First, the knowledge that even though we are still ensnared by ever-changing rules and regulations that hold our bodies captive and our churches closed, our hearts and minds are free, and we can be and stay in relationship with each other even though we are physically distanced. This church is not a beautiful building on Alvis Lane in New Braunfels. It is all of you, and your bonds with each other are strengthening even as you're apart. The second lesson I'm learning is that gratitude is a sweet and comforting feeling, one that science and neuroscience have found to be good for us physically, mentally, and emotionally. But if we decide to simply rest in it, we will not continue to mature spiritually. As the saying goes, a comfort zone is a lovely place in which to live, but nothing ever grows there. And this brings me to the third and most important lesson I'm learning during this strange and scary time, and it's this one. Gratitude, like love, is not just a feeling. Instead, it's a responsibility. It's not just about what we have. Instead, it's a forward dynamic that keeps us asking, what is mine to do this afternoon, this coming week, and every day for the rest of my life? What do I have that others need? How can I give that to them in the simplest way? How can we share with the kind of irrational generosity that will begin to heal the wounds we've inflicted on each other and on the earth? In the Christian liturgical calendar, today is the first Sunday of Advent, a season of waiting with hope and expectation. I've heard many people already lamenting in advance how subdued and empty Christmas will be this year. These emotions will also be felt by Jews celebrating Hanukkah, by Black people celebrating Kwanzaa, by pagans and Wiccans celebrating solstice and Yule, by Muslims celebrating Mawlid al-Nabi, the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, and by Hindus celebrating Gita Jayanti, which marks the creation of that faith's most sacred text. All of these holidays will be far more restricted and far less communal than in past years. And all of them will be pervaded by a sense of wistfulness and longing for better holidays next year with families and friends. Clearly, we are all in this together, and we are not the only people to live in a broken world that feels like it's teetering on the edge of destruction. The only logical question then is, what do we do? In what is thought to be the oldest book in the Christian scriptures, the Apostle Paul wrote to the new congregation at Thessalonica saying, "In everything, give thanks." It was only about 10 years ago that I realized this verse says, "In everything," not for everything, but in everything, give thanks. So, how will we and how can we give thanks in these difficult times? My own sense is that the most spiritually healthy thing we can do is to let our hearts and souls wander in the changing light of gratitude that fills this room we did not ask for. To slow down long enough to ask the bigger life questions about the meaning of our work, the difference we want to make, how we can shape the future, the importance of connection and community, and of raising up all people who are marginalized and making their needs as important as our own. How what we choose can lead to a deepening of our life together in the Spirit. And it's also the perfect opportunity to decenter our gratitude away from the advantages of our whiteness and to learn what grace-filled giving and receiving really mean. One of the people who's here today is a writer whose book about his experiences in the Vietnam War was recently published. As he says in the prologue, the book was written in response to a question some years ago by one of his sons. "Dad, what did you really do during the war?" I don't have children or grandchildren, but chances are good that during the next few years, I'll meet someone who will ask me, "So what did you do during the pandemic?" My answer will probably be something like this. I felt and named all of the feelings: anger, fear, impatience, frustration, despair. I had many emotional meltdowns because I missed my friends so much and all the tender hugs we used to share. I finally settled down and thought carefully about my own willingness and ability to change, my own mortality and the fragility of life, my whiteness, and how I can leverage my privilege for a more just world. I experienced the joy of living more simply, of rethinking what's important and what's not, of feeling my own circle of compassion widen, of distinguishing more clearly between wants and needs, and of knowing that grief and gratitude can coexist in even the hardest of times. I came to understand that the way we reframe and embrace gratitude during these difficult times will determine our spiritual future. I gave thanks more for what I'm becoming than for what I have, and for the responsibility that gratitude calls me to. And day after day, I reminded myself that everything and everyone teaches if only I'm willing to learn, and that all that is our life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, warrants our greatest presence and our loving attention. I have heard gratitude described as an ascending reflection of a descending grace. I love that. An ascending reflection of a descending grace. I believe so strongly that Unitarian Universalism is a unifying and generative faith, and that conscious ethic and practice of gratitude for what we are becoming can teach us how to create a grace that will descend on all we love and all we do. Today, I am filled with gratitude for the grace that has brought me to this moment and to you, for what you are teaching me, and for all that our life together is becoming. In these difficult times, may we deepen the feeling and the practice of our gratitude. May we hear what it's asking of us and gladly accept its responsibility. And may we live by gratitude's new possibilities and our own great hopes every moment for the rest of our days. Grace to us and peace. Amen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now may the grace of the Spirit continue to bless this courageous and loving group of people. May we dance with the responsibility that gratitude asks of us. And may grace and gratitude be the solid rock on which our lives are built. Amen.